Empire of AI. This video is based on key insights from the book Empire of AI by Karen Hao. Introduction: A Run for the Throne. The chapter opens with a dramatic scene. Sam Altman, the leader of OpenAI, learning he was fired during a break at a Formula One race. This sudden event sparked chaos within the company and raised big questions about OpenAI's future. Karen Hao explains this wasn't just a simple workplace issue, but a sign of deeper problems brewing within the organization. The initial reason given for Altman's firing: a lack of honesty with the board, felt incomplete to many, leading to wild speculation among employees, ranging from illegal activities to personal scandals. Hao details the initial shockwaves within OpenAI. Employees felt betrayed, especially because Altman had presented a public image of sincerity and success. The board's attempt to explain the situation during an all-hands meeting only made things worse. Their vague answers and refusal to provide specifics fueled anxiety and distrust. The board, led by Ilya Sutskever, insisted they were acting in the best interest of OpenAI's mission to create safe and beneficial artificial intelligence, but their explanations felt disconnected from reality. Employees began to wonder if the board was intentionally trying to sabotage the company. The author highlights the immense success OpenAI had achieved with ChatGPT, becoming a Silicon Valley sensation. Altman himself had become a celebrity, touring the world and promoting the technology as a force for good. This success, however, masked a growing tension between OpenAI's original idealistic goals and its increasingly commercial ambitions. Hao points out that OpenAI had transformed from a nonprofit, dedicated to open research, into a company driven by profit and competition. This shift created internal conflicts and ultimately contributed to Altman's downfall. Hao describes the escalating conflict between the board and OpenAI's leadership. After the initial firing, executives demanded the board resign, threatening to quit en masse. The board, however, remained steadfast, arguing that their actions were necessary to protect OpenAI's mission, even if it meant destroying the company. This standoff revealed a fundamental disagreement about what OpenAI should be: a company focused on profit or a guardian of responsible AI development. The situation became a power struggle, with the future of AI hanging in the balance. The narrative then shifts to a weekend of frantic negotiations and mounting pressure. Microsoft, OpenAI's major investor, publicly backed Altman, and employees threatened to join Microsoft if Altman wasn't reinstated. Sutskever eventually reversed his position, admitting his mistake and supporting Altman's return. The board ultimately conceded, agreeing to replace its members and allow Altman to remain CEO. The crisis was averted, but Hao argues it exposed the flaws in OpenAI's governance and the dangers of unchecked power. Hao frames OpenAI's story as a modern-day example of empire building. Like historical empires, OpenAI is aggressively acquiring resources, data, talent, and computing power to dominate the AI landscape. This pursuit of dominance comes at a cost: exploiting workers, consuming vast amounts of energy, and potentially exacerbating existing inequalities. The author emphasizes that OpenAI's actions are not unique. Other tech giants are engaged in a similar race to control the future of AI. Karen Hao concludes by urging a critical examination of the current trajectory of AI development. She argues that the focus on scale and profit is unsustainable and harmful. She calls for greater transparency, accountability, and a more inclusive approach to AI governance. The author believes that a different future is possible, one where AI benefits all of humanity, not just a select few. She suggests that we must challenge the narratives promoted by AI companies and demand a more responsible and equitable path forward. Chapter 1: Divine Right. Karen Hao opens her account of OpenAI with a scene of anticipation. A dinner gathering in 2015 meant to discuss the future of artificial intelligence. Elon Musk was late, a habit that hinted at a larger pattern of disregard for conventional rules. The core concern driving this group, including Musk and Sam Altman, wasn't just building AI, but controlling it. Musk, already worried about AI's potential dangers, saw a need for careful development and governance. He'd even invested in DeepMind to keep an eye on their progress, fearing a future where superintelligent AI could threaten humanity, even following us to other planets. He clashed with Google's Larry Page, who believed advanced AI was simply evolution, a disagreement that fueled Musk's anxieties and public warnings about an existential threat. Hao details Musk's growing obsession, fueled by conversations with AI researchers and a near-constant fear that others weren't taking the risks seriously enough. He envisioned AI as a demon and even considered writing a book about the dangers. This fear led him to seek out Sam Altman, whom he saw as a kindred spirit. Altman, younger and equally ambitious, shared Musk's concerns, even joking about having a go bag prepared for a doomsday scenario. Their shared anxieties formed the basis for OpenAI, initially conceived as a nonprofit Manhattan Project for AI designed to be open and benefit all of humanity. The author reveals a crucial dynamic. Altman skillfully mirrored Musk's views to gain his trust, a tactic that would become a hallmark of his leadership style. Hao suggests Altman was adept at understanding what people wanted to hear and presenting himself accordingly. This ability, honed through early entrepreneurial ventures like Looped, allowed him to build powerful networks and secure funding. He learned to tell compelling stories, convincing investors and policymakers of his vision. However, this talent also raised concerns about his honesty and willingness to prioritize personal gain. Hao paints a picture of Altman's upbringing, highlighting the influence of his parents, a doctor and a lawyer, and his early fascination with technology. He was a driven student, excelling in academics and extracurriculars, and comfortable pushing boundaries. Coming out as gay at a young age demonstrated a willingness to challenge norms, but also exposed him to prejudice. His time at Stanford and early startup experiences, including his involvement with Y Combinator and mentorship under Paul Graham and Peter Thiel, shaped his worldview and instilled in him a belief in the power of technology and economic growth. The author emphasizes the significant impact of Graham and Thiel on Altman's thinking. Graham saw in Altman a potential akin to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, while Thiel encouraged a focus on monopolies and a willingness to disrupt existing systems. These mentors instilled in Altman a relentless ambition and a pragmatic approach to achieving his goals. Hao notes that Altman's rise was not without controversy, with accusations of dishonesty and self-serving behavior following him from his early ventures. Hao introduces a troubling element, the strained relationship between Altman and his sister, Annie. Her allegations of abuse and abandonment paint a darker side of Altman's character, suggesting a pattern of prioritizing his own success over the well-being of those closest to him. This personal conflict foreshadows the larger power dynamics and ethical dilemmas that would come to define OpenAI's trajectory. The chapter concludes by suggesting that the future of AI and its impact on the world is inextricably linked to the complex and often contradictory nature of the individuals driving its development, particularly Sam Altman. It's a story of dreams and nightmares, ambition and betrayal, and the immense responsibility that comes with shaping the future of humanity. Chapter 2, A Civilizing Mission. Karen Hao details the early days of OpenAI, a company born from a big dream and a growing worry. It all started with a dinner where Elon Musk, Sam Altman, and others discussed building artificial intelligence, or AI, that could eventually match human intelligence, known as Artificial General Intelligence, or AGI. They believed this was crucial, not just for progress, but to prevent AI from becoming dangerous. This initial hope, however, quickly became tangled with practical problems and clashing visions. The founding team, including engineer Greg Brockman and scientist Ilya Sutskever, represented different sides of the coin. Brockman was a builder, eager to make things happen, while Sutskever was a researcher focused on the science. They attracted talented people, but securing funding proved difficult. Musk's initial pledge of $1 billion didn't fully materialize, and the founders realized a nonprofit structure might not be able to raise enough money to compete with tech giants like Google and DeepMind. This sparked a debate about whether to become a for-profit company, causing tension between Musk, Altman, and the others. Musk, driven by his fears of AI's potential risks, wanted control. Altman, however, saw a path forward with a unique structure, a limited partnership that would allow investment while still prioritizing OpenAI's mission. Eventually, Musk left, frustrated with the direction the company was taking. This departure highlighted a core conflict. Could OpenAI truly remain focused on benefiting humanity while also needing massive funding and competing in a cutthroat industry? As OpenAI grew, it faced internal struggles. There was a lack of clear direction, and employees felt stressed by unrealistic expectations. The company tried various projects, including training an AI to play the video game Dota 2, partly to showcase its abilities and attract investment. They also began working on large language models, like GPT-2, which could generate human-like text. While impressive, these projects didn't immediately solve the fundamental challenge of reaching AGI. The arrival of Microsoft as a major investor in 2019 was a turning point. Microsoft provided the financial resources OpenAI desperately needed, but it also raised questions about the company's original ideals. Some worried that OpenAI was losing sight of its mission to ensure AI benefits everyone, and instead becoming another company chasing profit. Throughout this period, a growing awareness of the potential harms of AI began to emerge. Researchers like Timnit Gebru pointed out that AI systems could perpetuate existing biases and inequalities. This challenged the focus on existential risks, the idea that superintelligent AI could wipe out humanity, and called for more attention to the real-world problems caused by AI today. The early days of OpenAI, as Hao recounts, were a complex mix of ambitious dreams, practical challenges, and growing anxieties about the future of AI and its impact on the world. It was a story of good intentions, colliding with the realities of power, money, and the unpredictable nature of technological progress. Chapter 3, Nerve Center. Karen Hao visited OpenAI in August 2019, finding a curious contrast between the bright, modern office and the struggling neighborhood outside. The building, once a trunk factory, now housed a company dreaming of changing the world with artificial intelligence, or AI. But Hao quickly discovered that OpenAI's dream wasn't simple. It was becoming tangled with big money, secrecy, and a growing sense of urgency. The initial vision of a nonprofit, openly sharing AI for everyone's benefit, was shifting. The story of OpenAI, as Hao learned, began with ambitious hopes. Founders like Greg Brockman and Ilya Sutskever believed AI could solve huge problems like climate change and healthcare. They imagined a future where smart machines would help everyone, not just a few. However, achieving this required enormous resources, leading to partnerships with companies like Microsoft and a complicated cap-profit structure. Hao observed that this shift sparked debate. Was OpenAI still committed to benefiting all of humanity, or was it becoming just another tech company chasing profits? Hao's conversations with Brockman and Sutskever revealed a core belief. OpenAI had to be at the forefront of AI development. They feared that if they didn't lead, someone else would, and that someone might not prioritize safety or fairness. This created a pressure cooker environment where speed and progress were valued above all else. Brockman spoke of AGI, artificial general intelligence, AI as smart as a human, as an inevitable force, and OpenAI's role as guiding its development. He envisioned a future where AGI would free people from work, but also acknowledged the potential for disruption. The author noted a disconnect between OpenAI's public statements and its internal practices. While promoting openness, the company was increasingly secretive, limiting access and carefully controlling information. Hao experienced this firsthand, with restricted access to meetings and a warning to employees after her visit not to speak with her without approval. This raised questions about what OpenAI was hiding and whether its commitment to transparency was genuine. Hao observed that the company's focus on being first could lead to shortcuts and potentially dangerous consequences. Hao's profile, published in February 2020, highlighted these concerns. It suggested that OpenAI's pursuit of ambitious goals was compromising its original ideals. The reaction was swift. Elon Musk, a former OpenAI investor, publicly criticized the company's safety measures. Altman, OpenAI's CEO, responded by downplaying the article and focusing on controlling the narrative. He emphasized the need to protect the company's image and investigate the source of the leaks. This response, Hao argued, further demonstrated the gap between OpenAI's stated values and its actual behavior. The dream of beneficial AI was becoming shadowed by the potential for unintended consequences and the pressures of a rapidly changing landscape. Chapter 4: Dreams of Modernity. Karen Hao begins by explaining that big changes, like new technologies, usually start with a hopeful idea, a dream of making things better for everyone. But she points out, history shows this doesn't always happen. Often, the people with the power to create these technologies end up benefiting the most, while others are left behind. She uses the example of the cotton gin, a machine that helped grow cotton faster, but also made slavery worse. Hao argues that artificial intelligence, or AI, is following a similar pattern. From the very beginning, AI has been driven by a big dream, the idea of creating machines that can think like humans. But this dream has been shaped by a small group of people with a lot of money and influence. This has led to problems, especially for people in poorer countries who are already facing challenges. Hao suggests that, just like in the past, those in power are painting a rosy picture of AI, even when it's causing harm. The story of AI's name itself shows this. It started as automata studies, but that didn't sound exciting enough. Changing it to artificial intelligence made it sound more impressive and attracted more funding. Hao calls this a marketing trick because the word intelligence makes people think of something good and desirable. This early branding set the stage for the hype and potential dangers surrounding AI today. Hao details how the field of AI developed, highlighting a long-running debate between two groups of scientists. One group, the symbolists, believed AI needed to be programmed with knowledge. The other, the connectionists, thought AI should learn from data like a brain. For a long time, the symbolists had more funding and influence, but eventually, the connectionists' approach, now known as deep learning, took over. This shift wasn't just about science. It was also about what kind of AI would be most profitable for companies. Deep learning requires huge amounts of data and computing power, which meant that only big tech companies could really afford to develop it. This led to a situation where these companies controlled the direction of AI research. Hao explains that this also created a culture of collecting as much data as possible, often without people's knowledge or consent. She calls this surveillance capitalism, where companies profit from tracking and analyzing our lives. Hao points out that this data collection isn't new. It echoes the history of colonialism, where powerful countries took resources from other parts of the world. Now, tech companies are extracting data from people, often from those who are already vulnerable. She shares examples of companies collecting data from students in developing countries and using facial recognition technology in ways that harm marginalized communities. The author emphasizes that the focus on deep learning has narrowed the range of ideas in AI research. Other approaches, like combining knowledge and learning, have been overlooked. Hao argues that this is because the big tech companies are pushing a specific vision of AI that prioritizes scale and profit over everything else. She uses the example of OpenAI, which is focused on building ever larger AI models, even though it's not clear what the ultimate goal is. Hao concludes by warning that the current path of AI development is unsustainable. The pursuit of bigger and more powerful models is consuming vast amounts of resources and potentially exacerbating existing inequalities. She suggests that we need to rethink our approach to AI and consider alternative visions that prioritize fairness, transparency, and accountability. The story of AI, she argues, is a reminder that technology is not neutral. It reflects the values and priorities of those who create it. Chapter 5, Scale of Ambition. Karen Hao details how OpenAI's ambitious scaling strategy, born from the strong beliefs of co-founder Ilya Sutskever, began to reveal both incredible potential and troubling risks. Sutskever, a brilliant mind who joined Geoffrey Hinton's lab as a teenager, firmly believed that simply making neural networks bigger would unlock artificial intelligence. He saw brains as incredibly complex networks of neurons and reasoned that bigger artificial networks could achieve similar intelligence. This idea became the core of OpenAI's approach, focusing on scaling up existing technology rather than inventing entirely new ones. This relentless pursuit of scale wasn't without internal debate. While Sam Altman focused on politics and fundraising, Sutskever's unwavering conviction drove the research direction. He wasn't interested in exploring alternative approaches. It was scale, scale, scale. As one engineer put it, this single-minded focus, while initially frustrating to some, ultimately allowed OpenAI to surpass competitors like Google and DeepMind. However, Sutskever's blunt communication style and tendency to make bold, sometimes alarming, pronouncements like suggesting AGI would eliminate all jobs created friction both inside and outside the company. He often lacked context when speaking to the public, leading to misunderstandings and criticism. The invention of the Transformer neural network by Google proved pivotal. Sutskever immediately recognized its potential for scaling, even when others were skeptical. Researchers like Alec Radford began experimenting, and their work led to GPT-2, a language model capable of generating surprisingly coherent text. But this success also revealed a dark side. GPT-2 could easily produce biased, hateful, or misleading content, raising concerns about misuse. OpenAI made the controversial decision to not fully release GPT-2, sparking outrage from researchers who believed in open science. The company argued that releasing such a powerful tool without safeguards was too dangerous. This decision marked a turning point. OpenAI began to grapple with the ethical implications of its work, realizing that its pursuit of AGI could have serious consequences. Jack Clark, OpenAI's strategy director, led efforts to shift the conversation around AI safety and responsible development. The company started to build partnerships with other organizations to study the risks and develop solutions. However, this shift also involved a degree of self-promotion, positioning OpenAI as a leader in AI safety while simultaneously pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The drive to scale continued with GPT-3, fueled by a massive investment from Microsoft and access to a powerful new supercomputer. Amodai, OpenAI's research director, wanted to build the largest possible language model, even if it meant pushing the limits of what was considered reasonable. This involved gathering enormous amounts of data, including questionable sources like scraped books from online piracy sites and unfiltered content from the internet. The quality of the data declined, but the sheer volume increased, raising concerns about bias and harmful content. Hao highlights how this relentless pursuit of scale had real-world consequences. Workers in developing countries were hired for low wages to filter harmful content and train the models, exposing them to disturbing material. The author points out that OpenAI's willingness to skirt ethical and legal boundaries, like copyright laws, gave it an advantage over more cautious companies like Google. This created a dangerous dynamic, where the race to build ever more powerful AI systems prioritized speed and scale over responsible development and human well-being. The chapter concludes with a sense of foreboding, suggesting that OpenAI's actions set in motion a chain of events that would reshape the AI landscape and raise profound questions about the future of technology and society. Chapter 6, Ascension. Karen Hao details in this chapter how Sam Altman, the leader of OpenAI, approached building the company with a relentless drive to win, a mindset he honed during his time at Y Combinator. He believed in refounding companies, meaning completely changing them to succeed, and he applied this to both YC and then OpenAI. Altman didn't want OpenAI to just be a leader in AI. He wanted it to be the leader, using a winner-takes-all strategy he'd taught to other startup founders. He aimed for technology that was 10 times better than anything else, constantly improving and speeding up development. This ambition, however, created tension within OpenAI. While Altman focused on rapid progress and commercial success, some researchers, like Dario and Daniela Amodei, worried about the potential dangers of powerful AI. They believed safety should be the top priority, fearing that rushing development could lead to disastrous outcomes. This difference in vision led to growing divisions within the company, with teams forming around different leaders and priorities. It was like having different groups pulling in different directions. Altman's strategy involved securing massive computing power, primarily through a partnership with Microsoft. This meant shifting OpenAI away from purely academic research and towards creating products that would benefit Microsoft, ensuring a continued flow of resources. He also decided to be more secretive about OpenAI's work, limiting publications and restricting information to maintain a competitive edge and address potential security risks. He wanted OpenAI to be seen as winning, believing this would attract support and influence policymakers. As OpenAI grew, internal conflicts intensified. Brockman, a key figure in early projects, clashed with the Amodei siblings over resource allocation and project direction. The AI safety team, led by the Amodeis, grew increasingly concerned about Altman's willingness to make deals with Microsoft that could compromise safety measures. A particular incident involving a coding error that caused a model to generate inappropriate content highlighted the potential risks of unchecked development. These tensions culminated in the departure of Dario and Daniela Amodei, along with several other researchers, who founded a competing company called Anthropic. They felt Altman was prioritizing speed and commercialization over safety, and they wanted to pursue a different path. This split underscored the fundamental disagreement within OpenAI about how to responsibly develop and deploy powerful AI. It was a dramatic moment, like a team breaking apart over a big disagreement about how to play the game. Hao illustrates that Altman's vision, while driving OpenAI's success, also created a pressure cooker environment. The constant push for progress, combined with increasing secrecy and internal conflicts, raised questions about whether OpenAI was truly prioritizing the long-term safety and benefit of humanity, or simply racing to become the dominant force in AI. The chapter reveals a company grappling with enormous responsibility, facing both exciting possibilities and terrifying risks, and struggling to navigate a path forward amidst internal turmoil and external pressures. Chapter 7, Science in Captivity. Karen Hao details how the release of OpenAI's GPT-3 in 2020 sparked a race among tech giants to build even bigger and more powerful AI models. Initially, the excitement was somewhat contained, but it quickly built towards the explosion of interest that ChatGPT would later cause. At Google, researchers felt embarrassed that OpenAI had surpassed them using technology Google itself had invented, the Transformer. Jeff Dean, a top leader at Google, suggested combining all of Google's AI projects into one massive model. But company leaders didn't listen until ChatGPT threatened their business, a moment they described as a code red. DeepMind, another AI lab owned by Google, also shifted its focus after GPT-3. A new researcher, Jeffrey Irving, who had previously worked at OpenAI, argued for building larger language models. Meta, formerly Facebook, initially wasn't interested in this approach, with its chief scientist, Yann LeCun, believing it wasn't a real path to scientific progress. However, ChatGPT changed Mark Zuckerberg's mind, and Meta quickly began investing heavily in generative AI. In China, companies like Alibaba and Baidu also started to take large language models more seriously after seeing the impact of ChatGPT. While the shift towards bigger models seemed slow at first, it was actually speeding up a trend that worried some researchers. Hao recounts her own conversation with OpenAI's leaders, Ilya Sutskever and Greg Brockman, where she brought up the environmental cost of training these massive models. Emma Struebel, a researcher, had already shown that training these models required huge amounts of energy, comparable to a cross-country flight. The problem was that AI developers often trained and retrained their models many times, increasing the energy consumption. Struebel's research showed that even optimizing a neural network could use as much energy as 5 cars over their lifetime. GPT-3, being much larger than previous models, consumed even more energy. The chapter also highlights the ethical concerns raised by Timnit Gebru, a prominent AI researcher at Google. Gebru worried that large language models, trained on vast amounts of internet data, could perpetuate harmful biases and stereotypes. She pointed to examples like a Facebook model incorrectly translating Arabic, leading to a wrongful arrest, and Google search results reinforcing racist stereotypes. OpenAI acknowledged that GPT-3 exhibited these biases, but said fixing them would require further research. Gebru's concerns were largely ignored by her colleagues, and she faced resistance when she tried to publish a paper detailing these issues with Emily Bender. Gebru and Bender's paper, on the dangers of stochastic parrots, warned about the environmental impact, the potential for bias, the difficulty of auditing training data, and the risk of people mistaking the model's output for genuine understanding. Google blocked the publication of the paper, leading to Gebru's controversial firing and a major outcry within the AI community. The incident exposed a pattern of censorship and a lack of support for ethical AI research within the company. Hao details how Gebru's firing sparked protests and a broader conversation about the responsibility of AI companies. Jeff Dean, despite his initial support for Gebru, became fixated on discrediting the research about the environmental impact of AI, even reaching out to the original researcher, Struebel, to collaborate on a paper that downplayed the issue. This attempt backfired when Struebel withdrew from the project. The incident with Gebru ultimately led to a decline in transparency within the AI industry, with companies becoming less willing to share details about their models. This lack of transparency makes it harder to understand and address the potential risks of these powerful technologies. Chapter 8, Dawn of Commerce. The year 2021 marked a turning point for OpenAI, as Karen Hao details, a shift from exciting research to a full-blown chase for profit. This change wasn't without its internal struggles, a kind of dream turning slightly into a nightmare for some who'd joined with different goals. The departure of the Anthropic team, who were worried about safety, cleared the way for leaders like Sam Altman to push forward with making money from their AI creations. They believed bigger models were the key, and they were ready to use Microsoft's powerful computers to build them. This ambition wasn't just about science, it was about building products. OpenAI planned to create not just better language models, like GPT-3, but also AI that could write code, turn images into descriptions, and even act as digital assistants completing tasks on their own. The plan was to release these tools to the public, learn from how people use them, and then make them even better. A cycle designed to quickly improve their AI and make more money. The dream was to reach artificial general intelligence, or AGI, a super smart AI that could do almost anything a human can. But this dream came with a growing awareness that simply making things bigger wasn't enough. They needed to find ways to make their AI more efficient and smarter with the same amount of computing power. As OpenAI started selling access to its AI through an API, problems began to surface. It was like opening a toolbox filled with powerful tools without a clear instruction manual. The company struggled to decide what people shouldn't use the AI for. They allowed some things, like writing social media posts, but banned others, like creating fake profiles. It felt a lot like making rules as they went along. They also started red teaming, trying to break their own AI to find weaknesses, but this process felt rushed and incomplete to some experts. It was a bit like testing a car by crashing it, but not very thoroughly. The real nightmares began when people started misusing the AI in harmful ways. One app, Replica, designed as a friendly companion, was used for inappropriate conversations. Another, Latitude, allowed users to create scenarios involving child sexual abuse. OpenAI scrambled to respond, sometimes blaming the users, sometimes the platforms, but the incidents revealed a serious lack of safeguards. It highlighted the dark side of powerful AI, its potential for abuse. These events caused a lot of stress within OpenAI, as employees wrestled with the ethical implications of their work. Meanwhile, the research team made progress with code generation, building an AI that could write computer programs. This was a big win for OpenAI and its partner, Microsoft, who saw the potential for a powerful coding assistant. However, the project raised questions about fairness. OpenAI had used code from GitHub, a platform where developers share their work without fully compensating them. It felt like taking something freely given and turning it into a profit-making tool. Altman, however, was thinking even bigger. He started investing heavily in long-shot projects like anti-aging research and nuclear fusion, believing these were the kinds of ambitious ideas that could truly change the world. He also launched a fund to invest in AI startups, further expanding his influence. Hao notes that while Altman claimed his motives were purely altruistic, his financial gains from these ventures were substantial. It was a complex picture, a blend of genuine ambition and personal profit. The chapter, as told by Hao, paints a picture of OpenAI at a crossroads. The initial dream of creating safe and beneficial AI was colliding with the realities of business and the potential for misuse. The company was scaling rapidly, but it was also grappling with difficult ethical questions and the growing realization that building powerful AI came with enormous responsibility. The early stages of commercialization were revealing both the promise and the peril of the technology, hinting at a future where the line between dreams and nightmares could become increasingly blurred. Chapter 9: Disaster Capitalism. Karen Hao details how OpenAI's ambitious goals came with a hidden cost, revealing a troubling pattern of exploiting workers around the world. The company, driven by Sam Altman's vision, moved from simply collecting data to controlling how its AI models behaved, a shift that placed a heavy burden on human workers. To make its AI safer and more useful, OpenAI needed people to review and categorize huge amounts of disturbing content, things like violence, hate speech, and abuse, so the AI wouldn't create similar material. OpenAI hired a company called Sama, with many workers in Kenya, to do this difficult job. Kenya was chosen because it was a poorer country eager for investment, making its workers vulnerable to low wages and tough conditions. Hao explains this is a continuation of a colonial pattern, where powerful countries take advantage of less powerful ones. The work itself was deeply upsetting. Workers read descriptions of terrible acts, trying to sort them into categories of severity. This took a toll on their mental health, and the pay was very low, ranging from about $1.46 to $3.74 an hour. Hao connects this situation to earlier research by Mary Gray and Siddharth Suri, who showed how much hidden labor goes into making AI work. They called it ghost work because it's often invisible to those who benefit from it. The author illustrates this with the example of self-driving cars, which require countless hours of people labeling objects in videos, tracing lane markings, identifying pedestrians, and so on. This work is often outsourced to countries where labor is cheap. The story then shifts to Venezuela, another country where economic crisis created a pool of desperate workers willing to do data annotation for very little money. Companies like Scale AI took advantage of this situation, offering low wages and pushing workers to their limits. One woman, Oscarina Fuentes, shared her experience with Hao, describing how she had to work constantly just to make ends meet, and how the unpredictable nature of the work controlled her life. Hao explains that Scale AI initially presented itself as an ethical company, but it quickly prioritized profits over worker well-being. It targeted countries in crisis, offered high initial earnings to attract workers, and then cut pay as it gained dominance. Workers who complained were often fired. This pattern repeated itself in Kenya, where Scale AI began hiring workers for OpenAI's projects, including the crucial work of refining ChatGPT. The chapter focuses on Moffat Akini, a Kenyan worker who was assigned to review sexually explicit content for OpenAI. The work was deeply disturbing and took a heavy toll on his mental health, ultimately contributing to the breakdown of his marriage. Hao emphasizes that Akini's story isn't unique. Many workers suffered similar consequences. OpenAI claimed it wasn't aware of the problems at Sama, but Hao argues that the company bears responsibility for the exploitation of its workers. Hao reveals that OpenAI also relied heavily on Scale AI for reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF, a process where workers provide examples and rank AI-generated responses to improve the model's quality. This involved workers writing prompts, answering questions, and evaluating the AI's outputs. As ChatGPT became more popular, the demand for RLHF workers increased, and Scale AI continued to exploit workers in countries like Kenya. Ultimately, Hao shows how OpenAI's pursuit of groundbreaking AI came at a significant human cost. The company's reliance on cheap labor in countries facing economic hardship created a system of exploitation that harmed workers' mental health and well-being. The author suggests that this is a systemic problem within the AI industry, driven by a relentless focus on profit and a disregard for the value of human labor. The story concludes with Scale AI abandoning Kenya, seeking more highly educated and expensive workers in the US, leaving workers like Winnie and her family in a desperate situation. Chapter 10, Gods and Demons. Karen Hao paints a picture of OpenAI as a place filled with big dreams and scary worries, all happening against the backdrop of a city struggling with huge problems. San Francisco, with its shiny tech companies and visible poverty, becomes a symbol of the disconnect between the promise of a better future and the reality of the present. This tension fuels the intense debate within OpenAI about how quickly and carefully to build powerful AI. The chapter highlights the rise of effective altruism, or EA, a philosophy that became popular in Silicon Valley. EA encourages people to use logic and capitalism to do the most good possible, even if it means making tough choices. This idea resonated with many at OpenAI, especially those focused on AI safety. The idea that superintelligent AI could pose a threat to humanity. They believed in tackling huge, long-term problems, even if it meant ignoring more immediate issues like homelessness in San Francisco. This focus on distant risks, while ignoring present-day suffering, created a moral conflict. The story then dives into the internal struggles at OpenAI, particularly the divorce between Sam Altman and the Amodei siblings. It reveals that the disagreement wasn't just about technical details, but about fundamental values. Ilya and Daniela Amodei believed Altman was moving too fast, prioritizing growth and profit over safety. They saw his willingness to compromise and his lack of transparency as dangerous. This clash of ideologies led them to found Anthropic, a competitor focused on responsible AI development. Hao details how EA attracted a lot of money from tech billionaires like Dustin Moskovitz and Sam Bankman-Fried, boosting AI safety research. However, this influx of cash also created a bubble, with people getting caught up in the ideology and sometimes engaging in harmful behavior. The collapse of FTX and Bankman-Fried's fraud exposed the dark side of this movement. Despite the scandal, the core ideas of EA and the focus on existential AI risks persisted, giving rise to a countermovement called E/AC, or effective accelerationism, which argued for speeding up AI development as much as possible. The chapter then focuses on the development of DALL-E 2, OpenAI's text-to-image generator. While incredibly impressive, it also raised serious safety concerns. The team struggled with how to prevent the model from being used to create harmful images, like child sexual abuse material. They made compromises, like allowing some questionable content in the training data to improve performance, which ultimately led to problems when the model was released. The story illustrates the difficult trade-offs between innovation and responsibility. Hao reveals a chaotic internal dynamic at OpenAI, with Sam Altman often prioritizing speed and commercialization over safety concerns. Brockman, a co-founder with a lot of influence, often disrupted projects and ignored established processes. The tension between the doomers, who feared AI's potential dangers, and the boomers, who embraced its possibilities, intensified. The chapter shows how OpenAI's structure, with a board meant to ensure the company's mission remained focused on benefiting humanity, was often undermined by Altman's desire for control. Finally, the chapter culminates in a dramatic scene at a company retreat, where Ilya Sutskever staged a symbolic burning of an effigy representing a deceptive AI. This act underscored the growing sense of urgency and fear within OpenAI about the potential dangers of the technology they were creating. It highlighted the deep philosophical divide within the company and the high stakes of their work. Karen Hao suggests that OpenAI, despite its ambitious goals, was grappling with fundamental questions about its purpose and its responsibility to the world. Chapter 11, Apex. Karen Hao details a period of incredible success and growing tension within OpenAI, starting in late 2022. The company held a celebratory offsite, showcasing impressive advancements, including early demonstrations of what would become GPT-4. Greg Brockman shared a story about GPT-4 potentially diagnosing his wife's illness, highlighting the dream of AI solving complex problems, particularly in healthcare. However, this hopeful vision was quickly shadowed by external pressures and internal conflicts. The rapid development of Anthropic, a competitor, spurred OpenAI to release ChatGPT sooner than planned. Initially framed as a research preview, ChatGPT quickly exploded in popularity, becoming the fastest-growing app in history. This success was a dream come true for OpenAI, catapulting it into the public spotlight. Yet, it also created a nightmare of scaling issues. Servers crashed constantly, the safety team was overwhelmed, and the initial expectation of a short-lived fad proved wildly inaccurate. The sheer demand exposed the company's lack of preparedness for such widespread adoption. Microsoft's investment became increasingly complex. While initially a supportive partner, Microsoft began to feel overshadowed by OpenAI's success, particularly with ChatGPT eclipsing its own chatbot for Bing. Microsoft shifted its resources, prioritizing OpenAI's models and even redirecting its own research efforts, a move that sparked resentment within its own ranks. This dependence created a new anxiety for OpenAI. Would Microsoft continue to support them if they didn't consistently deliver? The dream of a lean, mission-driven organization began to fade as OpenAI rapidly expanded. Altman resisted hiring, fearing a loss of culture and focus, but the pressure to scale forced a compromise. This growth led to a decline in hiring standards, internal friction, and a sense of disillusionment among some employees. The company, once a close-knit group, felt increasingly bureaucratic and ruthless. A sense of psychological unsafety grew, with employees fearing repercussions for speaking out. ChatGPT's success also highlighted a fundamental tension within OpenAI: the conflict between rapid innovation and responsible AI development. The trust and safety team struggled to keep pace with the model's capabilities and the resulting misuse. Attempts to build safeguards, like the Fact Factory, were hampered by limited resources and a perceived lack of prioritization from leadership. The model's tendency to hallucinate, making up information, remained a significant problem. As OpenAI navigated this new landscape, it began to compete directly with Microsoft for customers, adding another layer of complexity to their partnership. The demand for computing power became insatiable, leading to a massive new project, Stargate, a $100 billion supercomputer. This pursuit of ever greater computational resources underscored the escalating costs and environmental impact of AI development. Hao illustrates that OpenAI's journey, while marked by incredible achievements, was increasingly fraught with challenges, internal conflicts, and a growing sense of unease about the future. The initial dream of building beneficial AI was becoming entangled in a complex web of commercial pressures, technological limitations, and ethical concerns. Chapter 12, Plundered Earth. Karen Hao's 12th chapter dives deep into how the pursuit of powerful AI, particularly by OpenAI, is reshaping the world, often in ways that echo both exciting dreams and troubling nightmares. The story begins in Chile, a country rich in the minerals copper and lithium, essential for building the massive computers needed to run AI. Hao illustrates how Chile, historically exploited for its resources since the Spanish colonial era, is once again becoming a key supplier, this time for the tech industry's insatiable appetite. This pattern, where one nation benefits while another bears the environmental and social costs, is a central theme. Hao explains how the U.S. actively steered Chile's economic path towards resource extraction, starting in the 1950s with the Chile Project at the University of Chicago. This project, guided by economist Milton Friedman, promoted a free market approach that prioritized profit over government regulation. This legacy continues today, as Chile welcomes data centers, the physical homes of AI, but struggles to benefit equally from the technology they house. The arrival of these data centers, while promising economic investment, also threatens the country's already strained water and energy resources, sparking resistance from local communities. The chapter then shifts focus to the sheer scale of infrastructure required for modern AI. Hao describes how data centers have grown from small, hidden rooms to massive megacampuses, consuming enormous amounts of energy and water. She highlights the four tech giants, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta, driving this expansion, and their increasing secrecy around the environmental impact of their models. The author points out the misleading claims of efficiency and sustainability often touted by these companies, contrasting them with the reality of increased energy demand and the potential for environmental damage. Hao introduces the stories of individuals fighting back against this trend. Sonia Ramos, a Chilean activist, recounts a history of resource exploitation and the importance of protecting her community's land and water. In Quilicura, Chile, Alexandra Arancibia and Rodrigo Vallejos lead a local resistance against Microsoft's data center, challenging the company's promises and demanding accountability. These activists aren't simply opposing technology, they're advocating for a different path, one where development doesn't come at the expense of the environment and local communities. The author details OpenAI's relentless pursuit of computing power, outlining the phased development of its supercomputers with Microsoft's support. Each phase required exponentially more resources, raising concerns about sustainability and the feasibility of future expansion. Hao reveals internal discussions about ambitious plans for a $100 billion supercomputer, highlighting the immense energy demands and the reliance on potential breakthroughs in energy production, like nuclear fusion. Hao emphasizes that digital technologies aren't weightless. They require tangible resources and have real-world consequences. The chapter underscores the tension between the promise of AI and the environmental and social costs of its development. The author illustrates how the narrative of progress often masks the exploitation of resources and communities in the global South. Finally, Hao presents a vision for a different future, inspired by the work of researchers and activists in Chile. She suggests that Chile, with its history of resource extraction, is uniquely positioned to lead a decolonial approach to AI development, one that prioritizes sustainability, equity, and respect for the environment. The chapter concludes with a call for a more thoughtful and responsible approach to AI, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of technology, society, and the planet. Chapter 13, The Two Prophets. Karen Hao details a period of intense activity and growing tension within OpenAI, revealing a company grappling with its own ambitions and the potential consequences of its creations. The chapter centers on Sam Altman's skillful navigation of Washington, D.C. in 2023, where he presented a compelling vision of AI solving global problems while subtly shaping the conversation around regulation to benefit OpenAI. He successfully appealed to lawmakers' fears about China, advocating for oversight that focused on future, powerful AI models rather than addressing immediate concerns like job displacement or data privacy. This strategy, Hao explains, was a continuation of OpenAI's long-held practice of controlling the narrative and prioritizing speed of development. The author highlights a stark contrast between OpenAI's charmed access to power and the struggles of those potentially harmed by its technology. While Altman dined with senators, concept artists were scrambling for attention, voicing concerns about AI replacing their livelihoods. This illustrates a core theme. The benefits of AI are not evenly distributed, and OpenAI's influence allows it to steer the conversation away from accountability. Hao notes that Altman's proposals, emphasizing compute power as a key metric for regulation, were quickly adopted by policymakers despite internal disagreements among AI researchers about their validity. This demonstrates how easily fear and a focus on hypothetical risks can overshadow practical concerns. Hao describes a growing divide within OpenAI itself, between those focused on rapid advancement and those prioritizing safety. The boomers and doomers, those optimistic about AI's potential versus those fearing its existential risks, represent opposing forces within the company. Sam Altman, while publicly promoting AI's benefits, seemed to prioritize speed and control, sometimes at the expense of transparency and genuine safety considerations. The formation of the Superalignment team, led by Ilya Sutskever, was an attempt to address the potential dangers of highly advanced AI, but it also revealed a deeper rift within the company. The author points out that OpenAI's strategy of controlling access to its models, framed as a safety measure, was also a way to maintain its dominance. The company's efforts to influence policy, coupled with its internal conflicts, created a complex and often contradictory picture. Hao details how OpenAI's board became increasingly fractured, with independent directors struggling to gain visibility into the company's operations and questioning Altman's motives. The author illustrates this with examples of Altman's attempts to influence board decisions and his lack of transparency regarding potential conflicts of interest. Karen Hao concludes by setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation, hinting at a looming crisis within OpenAI. The analogy to the Manhattan Project, frequently invoked by Altman, underscores the immense power and responsibility that come with developing potentially world-altering technology. However, the author suggests that OpenAI's approach, prioritizing speed and control over careful consideration of risks, may be repeating the mistakes of the past. The chapter leaves the reader with a sense of unease, questioning whether OpenAI is truly prepared for the consequences of its ambitions and whether the world is adequately prepared for the age of advanced AI. Chapter 14, Deliverance. Karen Hao reveals a deeply personal and troubling side of Sam Altman's story in this chapter, one that casts a shadow over the bright future OpenAI promises. The chapter centers on the complicated relationship between Sam and his sister, Annie, and how it reflects broader issues within the company and its potential impact on the world. Altman's public image of building a world of abundance through AI clashes sharply with the struggles of his own sister, who has faced years of health problems, financial insecurity, and feelings of being ignored by her family. The story unfolds after a New York Magazine profile brought Annie's difficulties into the public eye. It details a pattern of Altman offering support to Annie, then withdrawing it, often deferring to their mother's belief that Annie needed to become financially independent. This created a painful cycle for Annie, who felt abandoned and unsupported, especially as her health deteriorated. The situation escalated when Annie publicly accused Sam of childhood sexual abuse, leading to a family denial and a lawsuit. Hao emphasizes that Annie's story isn't just a family drama. It's a window into Altman's character and how that character shapes OpenAI. Hao meticulously lays out Annie's side of the story, backed by medical records and correspondence, contrasting it with the family's public statements. While the truth of the abuse allegations remains unprovable, the chapter highlights Annie's long-standing mental and physical health struggles, exacerbated by her father's death and a perceived lack of support from her family. It shows how she turned to sex work as a last resort when traditional avenues failed, a desperate measure fueled by a system that seemingly failed to protect her. This situation mirrors the concerns about AI potentially widening existing inequalities, as the benefits of this technology may not reach those most in need. The author points out the striking similarities between Sam and Annie, both intelligent, empathetic, and charismatic. However, their paths diverged dramatically, and Annie's struggles seem to have been minimized or dismissed by her brother and the rest of the family. Hao notes that OpenAI executives noticed the coverage of Annie and its potential impact on the company's image. This reveals a pattern of prioritizing reputation management over addressing genuine concerns. OpenAI's communications head, Hannah Wang, became heavily involved in controlling the narrative around Annie, demonstrating how personal issues became company problems. Hao draws a parallel between Altman's vision of AI solving global problems like poverty and healthcare, and his inability to address his sister's very real needs. The author suggests that OpenAI's promises of a better future ring hollow when contrasted with the struggles of individuals like Annie and the workers exploited in the AI supply chain. The chapter also reveals a disturbing pattern of Altman allegedly discrediting Annie by suggesting she has a mental illness. A tactic Hao notes is often used to silence accusers. The chapter culminates with Annie filing a lawsuit against Sam, and the family issuing a forceful denial of her allegations. Hao underscores that Annie's story is a microcosm of the larger issues surrounding OpenAI: power imbalances, the prioritization of profit over people, and the potential for technology to exacerbate existing inequalities. The final revelation that Ilya Sutskever, a key figure in OpenAI, was aware of Annie's story and grappling with his own concerns about Altman adds another layer of complexity, hinting at internal conflicts within the company and the potential for a reckoning. Ultimately, Hao presents a compelling argument that OpenAI and its leader are not simply building a revolutionary technology, but are also reflecting and amplifying existing societal flaws. Chapter 15, The Gambit. Karen Hao paints a picture of growing unease within OpenAI, a company dreaming of a powerful future with artificial intelligence, but haunted by internal struggles that threaten to turn that dream into a nightmare. The chapter focuses on the weeks leading up to the dramatic firing of Sam Altman, revealing a web of anxieties and power plays among the company's leaders. It's a story about how personal ambitions and fears can jeopardize a mission with huge consequences for the world. Myra Murati, OpenAI's chief technology officer, emerges as a key figure trying to navigate this chaos. Her background, shaped by a turbulent childhood in Albania, instilled in her a calm resilience. She's a problem solver, trusted by many to see through Sam Altman's often confusing statements and actions. Murati increasingly found herself cleaning up Altman's messes, mediating conflicts, and trying to keep the company on track despite his tendency to overpromise and undermine his teams. She observed Altman's anxiety growing as his fame increased, leading to more manipulative behavior and a disregard for established processes. The chapter highlights a growing disconnect between Altman's vision and the concerns of others, particularly Ilya Sutskever, OpenAI's chief scientist. Sutskever, deeply focused on the safety of advanced AI, became increasingly worried that Altman was prioritizing speed and growth over responsible development. He felt Altman was abusing his power, making decisions without transparency, and creating a toxic environment where trust was eroding. Sutskever's anxieties weren't just about internal politics. They were about the potential dangers of unleashing powerful AI without proper safeguards. Murati and Sutskever both independently reached out to board member Helen Toner, sharing their concerns about Altman's leadership. Murati described a pattern of Altman agreeing with everyone to their face while secretly undermining them, and a growing inability to hold him accountable. Sutskever expressed a more fundamental fear, that Altman wasn't the right person to guide the development of artificial general intelligence, AGI, a hypothetical AI that could perform any intellectual task that a human being can. He even suggested, privately, that replacing Altman might be necessary. Altman, sensing the growing discontent, attempted to discredit Toner by focusing on a research paper she had co-authored, claiming it was critical of OpenAI. He even misrepresented a conversation with board member Macaulay, falsely claiming she agreed Toner should be removed. This manipulation backfired when Sutskever discovered the falsehood, further solidifying his concerns about Altman's trustworthiness. The chapter reveals a company on the brink, where the dream of a beneficial AI future was threatened by the nightmares of internal conflict, unchecked power, and a leader seemingly more concerned with his own image than with the responsible development of potentially world-altering technology. Hao demonstrates how the personal dynamics within OpenAI were becoming a critical safety issue, raising the stakes for the future of AI and its impact on humanity. Chapter 16, Cloak-and-Dagger. Karen Hao details a period of intense turmoil at OpenAI, revealing a clash of visions about the company's future and the potential dangers of powerful AI. The chapter unfolds like a suspenseful drama, showcasing how quickly dreams of building beneficial AI could turn into a nightmare of mistrust and power struggles. The core issue wasn't just about Sam Altman's leadership style, but about whether OpenAI could responsibly develop artificial general intelligence, AGI, AI that could perform any intellectual task a human can. The story begins with growing concerns among key figures like Sutskever and Murati about Altman's behavior. They felt he wasn't honest, manipulated people, and prioritized growth over safety. These weren't isolated complaints. At least 7 people close to Altman voiced similar worries. This created a deep sense of unease, especially considering OpenAI's mission to create AGI safely. The independent board members, Toner, Macaulay, and D'Angelo, began secret meetings to decide if Altman should be removed. They worried Altman might be testing their loyalty, pushing out anyone who questioned him. They also questioned if his actions were acceptable even for a typical tech company, let alone one building potentially world-altering technology. Sutskever provided evidence, not one big smoking gun, but a collection of instances where Altman said different things to different people, creating confusion and frustration. He and Murati gathered screenshots and documents, delivered secretly, showing Altman bending or ignoring rules, even regarding AI safety. For example, he allegedly tried to skip a safety review for a new version of GPT, misleading Murati about legal advice. The board also considered how Altman's actions impacted Microsoft, OpenAI's major investor, and his attempts to influence the board's composition. They decided to focus on Altman's professional conduct, not personal allegations from Annie, a former employee. The independent directors ultimately decided to remove Altman, believing his lack of transparency and control-seeking behavior were too risky for a company developing AGI. They appointed Murati as interim CEO, expecting a smooth transition. However, they severely underestimated Altman's influence and the loyalty he'd built within the company. He immediately painted his removal as a coup led by Sutskever, and employees rallied to his defense. Key leaders like Jason Kwon and Anna McIntyre aggressively challenged the board's accusations, demanding proof they couldn't provide without revealing confidential sources. Sutskever, initially firm in his decision, began to waver as he realized the potential for OpenAI to collapse. Murati, despite initially agreeing with the board, also became hesitant, fearing she couldn't unite the company. She privately communicated with the board while publicly appearing unsure. The situation spiraled further when Brockman resigned, followed by other key employees. The board desperately sought a replacement interim CEO, but Emmett Shear, their first choice, ultimately sided with Altman, influenced by investors and friends like Elon Musk. Musk, adding to the chaos, publicly amplified criticisms of OpenAI and shared a letter from anonymous former employees alleging further misconduct by Altman. Hao reveals she was inadvertently drawn into this drama when Musk tweeted links to her reporting, seemingly to bolster the claims against Altman. The board's miscalculation was complete. Facing a full-scale revolt, they reinstated Altman as CEO, hoping to salvage the company. The investigation led by the new board members, Summers and Taylor, cleared Altman, finding his behavior problematic but not disqualifying. The report remained confidential. The chapter concludes with a sense of unease, suggesting the underlying issues haven't been resolved and the dream of safe AGI remains threatened. The events at OpenAI highlight the immense challenges of controlling powerful technology and the human dramas that unfold when ambition, fear, and differing visions collide. It's a cautionary tale about the potential for even the most well-intentioned projects to be derailed by internal conflicts and the complexities of human nature. Chapter 17, Reckoning. Following the upheaval of Sam Altman's brief removal, OpenAI experienced a growing sense of unease and division, as detailed by Karen Hao. The departure of Ilya Sutskever, a key figure focused on AI safety, signaled a weakening of those voices within the company. Many who feared the potential dangers of rapidly advancing AI began to leave, feeling their concerns were no longer valued. This created a rift, as the company prioritized speed and innovation over careful consideration of risks. A major point of contention was Altman's plan to build an AI chip company. While he framed it as a way to increase computing power and accelerate progress, those concerned about safety saw it as recklessly speeding up development, potentially leading to catastrophic outcomes. A tense exchange during an office hours meeting highlighted this disagreement, with Altman questioning how much delaying a medical cure would be worth to avoid potential AI risks. This dismissive attitude further pushed safety-minded employees out the door. Meanwhile, OpenAI was making significant strides with its new model, Scallion. It wasn't just better at understanding language. It could also process images and audio, making interactions feel more natural and human-like. Researchers were amazed by its abilities, like delivering stand-up comedy routines and even mimicking the voices of OpenAI leaders in surreal scenarios. This progress, however, felt alarming to the shrinking safety team, who saw it as another step towards powerful AI being released without adequate safeguards. The launch of Scallion, rebranded as GPT-4o, was rushed due to competition from Google and Anthropic. Despite internal warnings about insufficient safety testing, Altman pushed forward, prioritizing speed over caution. A memo from a remaining safety researcher detailed how limited the testing timeframe was and how Altman dismissed concerns. This disregard for safety protocols fueled further departures. The launch itself was met with both excitement and controversy. The model's ability to mimic human conversation, including flirtatious responses, sparked jokes and concerns about its potential for manipulation. While OpenAI celebrated its achievement, cracks were beginning to show. The situation worsened with revelations about OpenAI's practices regarding employee equity and non-disparagement agreements. Former employees discovered that leaving the company without signing an agreement preventing them from speaking negatively about it meant forfeiting their stock options, a significant financial loss. This practice, and Altman's initial denials about it, sparked outrage and accusations of dishonesty. Adding to the turmoil, Scarlett Johansson publicly accused OpenAI of creating a voice for GPT-4o that closely resembled her own, without her permission. She had previously declined a request to voice the AI, and felt the company intentionally copied her voice to capitalize on her fame. This incident raised questions about intellectual property and the ethical implications of AI voice cloning. Hao details how these events created a crisis of trust within OpenAI. Employees felt betrayed by leadership's actions and questioned Altman's integrity. The company's attempts to downplay the issues and control the narrative only exacerbated the problem. The author notes that the situation highlighted a deeper pattern, a concentration of power and a willingness to prioritize ambition over ethical considerations. Attempts to bring Sutskever back to OpenAI to restore some stability ultimately failed due to internal power struggles. The chapter concludes with a sense of foreboding, suggesting that OpenAI's pursuit of AGI was becoming increasingly reckless and detached from the concerns of those who feared its potential consequences. The author implies that the company was more focused on winning the AI race than on ensuring a safe and beneficial future for humanity. Chapter 18, A Formula for Empire. Karen Hao reveals in this chapter how OpenAI, initially built on hopeful ideas, began to resemble a quest for power, much like Napoleon's empire. Sam Altman, the leader of OpenAI, admired Napoleon's understanding of people and how he used ideas like freedom and equality to gain control, even if he didn't truly believe in them. Hao argues that OpenAI's stated goal, to make sure powerful AI helps everyone, started to become a way to gather resources and build a strong position, similar to building an empire. This empire was built on three main things. First, OpenAI attracted talented people by promising to achieve something huge. Second, it gathered money and removed obstacles, claiming that progress needed to happen quickly. And third, the idea of benefiting humanity was kept vague, allowing OpenAI to do whatever it wanted in the name of its mission. Hao points out that Altman himself admitted the term AGI, artificial general intelligence, was meaningless, yet it was used to justify the company's actions. The chapter details how OpenAI's mission changed over time. It started as a nonprofit wanting to share research, but slowly became more focused on making money and keeping its technology secret. Each shift was explained as being for the mission, but ultimately led to more control for OpenAI and Altman. After the internal crisis in 2024, Altman wanted even more control, pushing to change the company's structure so he couldn't be easily removed. He also wanted to partner more closely with Microsoft, ensuring continued profits. Behind the scenes, disagreements continued. Those worried about AI safety, doomers, clashed with those focused on progress, boomers. Key people left OpenAI, feeling their concerns weren't being heard. Despite these issues, OpenAI continued to make deals, like one with Apple, and raise huge amounts of money. Hao suggests this was all part of a plan to dominate the AI world, no matter the cost. The chapter highlights a growing tension. OpenAI claimed to be working for the good of humanity, but its actions suggested it was more interested in power and profit. Hao notes that even as OpenAI faced criticism and lost important employees, Altman continued to make grand promises about the future of AI. The company secured a massive investment, but it came with a condition: it had to become a traditional for-profit company. Ultimately, Hao portrays OpenAI's journey as a cautionary tale. What began as a hopeful project to create beneficial AI transformed into a company focused on control and dominance, echoing the strategies of historical figures like Napoleon. The author suggests that OpenAI's pursuit of AGI and its ambitious mission were used as tools to build an empire, raising questions about whether its original ideals were ever truly genuine. Conclusion: How the Empire Falls. Karen Hao concludes her investigation with a hopeful yet cautious look at the future of artificial intelligence, beginning with a story about a unique project in New Zealand. She learned about an indigenous community using AI not to replace their culture, but to save it. The Maori language, Te Reo Maori, was almost lost because of past rules that punished people for speaking it. Now, they're using AI to help a new generation learn the language from recordings of elders, preserving their history and traditions. This story highlights a very different way to think about AI, not as a tool for big companies to control, but as a way for communities to strengthen themselves. Hao explains that losing a language is like losing a whole world of knowledge, stories, and ways of understanding life. AI, ironically, could speed up this loss for many of the world's languages, because most AI models are built using only a few widely spoken languages. This creates a digital world where it's harder for people who speak less common languages to participate and succeed. The Mari project, however, shows that AI can be used to fight back against this trend. The Mari couple leading the project, Peter Lucas Jones and Keone Mahalona, made sure their work respected the community's rights and values. They got permission before using anyone's voice recordings, made sure the data stayed under their control, and focused on building a tool specifically for their community's needs. This is a stark contrast to how OpenAI and other big tech companies collect data, often without clear consent or benefit to the people whose information is used. Hao points out that this data collection feels like a new kind of colonization, where companies grab information and then sell it back as a service. Hao emphasizes that T-Hiku's approach, small, focused, and community-driven, is a powerful alternative to OpenAI's goal of building massive, all-purpose AI models. They didn't need huge amounts of data or expensive computers. They just needed to respect the people and culture they were working with. This success story, along with others she discovered during her research, led Hao to believe that AI doesn't have to be about building empires. It can be about empowering communities. The author highlights the work of Timnit Gebru, who started the Distributed AI Research Institute, DAIR, after being forced out of Google. Gebru's goal is to build an AI research organization that is truly global and inclusive, where researchers stay connected to their communities and work on problems that matter to those communities. Similarly, Alex Hanna and Milagros Meisli at DAIR created a research project that paid data workers a fair wage to share their experiences and ideas about how to improve the industry. In Kenya, Moffat Akini is organizing data workers to fight for better pay and working conditions. And in Uruguay, Daniel Pina is connecting communities resisting the negative impacts of big tech. Hao argues that the key to changing the future of AI is to shift power away from the big companies and back to the people. She suggests focusing on 3 areas: knowledge, resources, and influence. To redistribute knowledge, we need more independent research and transparency about how AI models work. To redistribute resources, we need stronger labor protections and fairer compensation for data workers. And to redistribute influence, we need to educate people about AI so they can make informed decisions about how it's used. Hao concludes that by supporting these kinds of efforts, we can move away from an AI future dominated by empires and toward one that is more democratic and equitable. And that brings us to the end of our summary of this book. I hope you found it insightful and valuable. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe for more. Your support helps us bring you more great content. Thanks for watching.